A millionaire widower followed his nanny after work. What he discovered changed everything. Emma had always been a quiet observer of life. A single mother, working long hours as a nanny for a millionaire widower named James Carter, she'd seen her fair share of hardships. Her life had always revolved around her son, trying to make ends meet while taking care of James's young daughter, Lily. James, a man who had once been full of ambition and energy, was now distant, wrapped in his grief over his late wife. Emma knew him only through his cold, businesslike demeanor, his absence at family events, and his focus on work. But she didn't mind. It was just another job, one where she could be of service to someone who needed her. It wasn't until one late evening that everything started to change. After finishing her usual duties, Emma gathered her things and prepared to leave, like she always did. But tonight felt different. Something was off in the air. As she stepped outside, she noticed James was still at the office, his car parked in the driveway. She thought nothing of it at first, assuming he was just working late. However, as she walked down the sidewalk, she heard the soft rumble of an engine behind her. Turning, she saw James's car moving slowly along the street. Was he following her? Emma's heart raced. She quickened her pace, not understanding why James was suddenly so interested in where she was going. She couldn't help but wonder, was he concerned about her? Or was there something more to this? Emma's mind raced, her footsteps echoing in the quiet street. She walked for a while, trying to keep a safe distance, all the while feeling the weight of his eyes on her back. She didn't dare look behind to confirm, but the presence of his car was unmistakable. Was this some kind of test? Was he checking up on her, perhaps trying to see if she was trustworthy? The tension in the air was palpable, but she didn't stop. She walked down to the park, a place where she often took Lily after school. But tonight, she didn't go there to rest. Instead, she felt a strange mix of curiosity and fear creeping into her chest. What would James do next? She glanced behind her and finally saw the silhouette of his car, parked across the street, a little further down the road. He wasn't moving anymore. Emma paused, standing still in the middle of the sidewalk. Her mind raced, but her heart felt heavy. She had no idea why James had followed her, or what this would mean for her future. But one thing was for sure, this night would change everything. What she didn't know was that James was about to discover something that would shift his entire perspective on life. A simple act of following her would reveal more than just Emma's routine. It would unravel secrets that neither of them had been ready for. And from that moment on, their lives would be intertwined in ways they never could have imagined. As Emma stood still in the middle of the sidewalk, her heart pounding in her chest, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to happen. She had no idea why James was following her or what he was trying to accomplish, but her mind couldn't stop racing. Was this some kind of test? Or maybe he was simply curious about her life outside of being his nanny. She had been with the Carter family for over a year now, and in all that time, James had barely spoken more than a few words to her. But tonight was different. Tonight, everything was changing. The street was quiet, and the only sounds were the rustling of leaves in the trees and the distant hum of city traffic. She turned down a small alley that led to the park, trying to shake the tension in her body. The cool evening air hit her face, but it did little to calm her nerves. She could still feel the weight of his gaze on her back. She tried to focus on the sounds around her, anything to distract from the tight knot in her stomach. But no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't stop thinking about James. What did he want? What was he looking for? As she neared the park, she slowed down, wondering if she should confront him. But the thought of facing him, especially after the strange behavior she had just witnessed, made her hesitate. She decided to continue on, taking a seat on one of the benches by the fountain. The park was peaceful, with only a few people out for a walk or sitting on the benches. Like her, she stared into the water, her thoughts swirling. She wasn't sure what had caused James to follow her, but one thing was clear: this wasn't normal. The longer she sat there, the more unsettled she became. She tried to convince herself that maybe she was overthinking things. Maybe James had just been going for a drive and happened to pass by her. But deep down, she knew it wasn't that simple. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of tires on gravel. She looked up and saw James's car parked a few feet away from the park entrance. He was watching her. Emma's heart skipped a beat, and for a moment, she felt exposed. The man who had been nothing but distant and cold was now watching her with a kind of intensity she couldn't quite understand. He didn't get out of the car. He simply sat there, his eyes focused on her. Emma swallowed hard, trying to steady her breath. She didn't know how long they sat there in silence. The only sounds the soft rustling of leaves and the distant hum of the city. She felt trapped, caught in this strange, uncomfortable moment. But then, as if he had made a decision, James finally got out of the car and began walking toward her. His steps were slow and deliberate, and Emma felt a wave of uncertainty wash over her. What was he going to say? What was going to happen now? As he reached the bench, he paused, looking down at her with a faint, almost hesitant smile. "Emma," he said, his voice softer than she had ever heard it before. "I think we need to talk." The words caught her off guard. She had never heard him speak to her like that before. His tone was calm, almost like he was trying to be gentle. "What is it?" she asked, trying to hide the unease in her voice. I've been following you for a while now," James admitted, his eyes not leaving hers. "And I've realized something." Emma felt her heart race as she waited for him to continue. "I've been a terrible employer," he said quietly, the weight of his words sinking in. "I've barely paid any attention to you, to your life, to anything beyond what I need. But you." He paused, looking down at his feet for a moment before meeting her gaze again. "You're the only person in my life who truly cares for my daughter. You've done more for her than I ever have, and I can't ignore that anymore." Emma was stunned. She had never heard him speak like this before. James was always so focused on his work, so distant, and now he was standing here, admitting that he had been wrong. She didn't know how to respond. She had never expected anything like this from him. "I know this is coming out of nowhere," James continued, "but I just wanted to say thank you. For everything. For caring for Lily when I couldn't." Emma felt a lump form in her throat, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. She wasn't sure how to process what was happening. This wasn't the man she had known. This wasn't the cold, distant billionaire who only cared about his business. This was someone else entirely. But even as the words hung in the air between them, Emma couldn't help but feel something stir inside her. Could this be the beginning of a new chapter in their lives? Could this be the moment that everything changed? As Emma sat there, still processing James's words, 1,000 thoughts raced through her mind. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. He was acknowledging everything she had done for his daughter, Lily, but more importantly, he was seeing her for the first time, not just as a nanny, but as someone who mattered. A part of her was relieved, but another part was unsure of what to do with this sudden shift in their dynamic. Was this genuine? Was it too late? She had spent so long maintaining a professional distance, keeping her emotions locked away, but now, with his words hanging in the air, she wasn't sure anymore. She took a deep breath, steadying herself. "I don't know what to say," Emma finally said, her voice shaking slightly. She felt vulnerable, exposed. For so long, she had kept her personal life, her struggles, to herself. She had been there for Lily, but no one had ever really seen her, not truly. James seemed to sense her discomfort, and he sat down beside her on the bench, his gaze softening. "You don't have to say anything," he replied quietly. "I just needed to say it, to let you know that I see you. For everything you've done for Lily, and for me." Emma couldn't remember the last time someone had said something so kind to her. She had been so focused on getting by, on surviving, that she had forgotten what it felt like to be acknowledged, to be seen. James's words hit her in a way she wasn't prepared for. She blinked rapidly, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill. She cleared her throat, looking away for a moment, gathering her composure. "I've always just tried to do my job," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Taking care of Lily, making sure she's safe, that she's happy. That's all that matters to me." James nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I know, and that's why I'm so grateful. But I also know I haven't been the father she needs. I've been too focused on my own grief, on work, and I've neglected her. And you." He paused for a moment, almost as if weighing his next words. "I've realized that I need to change, not just for Lily, but for myself. I've been so closed off, so distant, and I don't want to keep living like that. I want to be better. For you, for Lily, for all of us." Emma felt a surge of emotion at his words, but she held herself back, unsure of how to respond. Was this the start of something real? She had always admired James from afar, but she had never allowed herself to believe that he could change. He had always seemed so wrapped up in his own world, so cold, that it was hard to imagine him as anything else. But now, sitting beside her on the bench, looking at her with sincerity in his eyes. It was as if a switch had flipped inside him. She had never seen him like this before. The man in front of her was not the distant billionaire who had buried himself in work and grief. He was a man who was finally opening up, who was admitting his flaws, and that was something Emma had never expected from him. "I don't know if I can trust you just yet," Emma said slowly, choosing her words carefully. "But I'm willing to see where this goes. I've spent so much time hiding, protecting myself, but maybe it's time for me to stop running." James looked at her, his gaze intense, but there was a softness there now, something she hadn't seen before. He nodded, his expression showing that he understood. "I don't expect you to trust me right away," he said gently, "but I'm willing to prove it to you, one step at a time." Emma didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe things could change. Maybe they could both heal, together. As she stood up from the bench, she felt a weight lift off her shoulders. She didn't have all the answers, but she knew that this was a new beginning. She didn't have to do everything on her own anymore. She could finally let someone in, and maybe, just maybe, that would make all the difference. As the days passed after their conversation in the park, Emma and James began to find a new rhythm in their relationship. It was awkward at first, the distance between them closing slowly, but they were making progress. James had been true to his word, taking small steps to show that he wanted to be a better father to Lily and a better person overall. He started spending more time with her, taking her to school in the mornings, picking her up in the afternoons, and even reading her bedtime stories, something he had never done before. Emma watched this transformation with a mixture of skepticism and hope. She had seen James at his most distant, and she wasn't sure she could believe in the man who was now making the effort to change. But each small act, each thoughtful gesture, made her wonder if there was more to him than the cold, grieving billionaire she had known. One evening, as Emma was preparing to leave for the night, James asked if she would stay a little longer. She hesitated but agreed, unsure of what he wanted but willing to give him the benefit of the doubt. They sat together in the living room, a comfortable silence between them as Lily played with her toys in the corner. James was the one to break the silence. "Emma," he said, his voice steady but vulnerable, "I want to talk to you about something." Emma looked up at him, her heart skipping a beat. This was the first time in a while that he had initiated a conversation with her that wasn't about Lily or work. "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice neutral, though a part of her was already anxious about what was coming next. James paused for a moment, as if gathering his thoughts. "I know I've made mistakes," he began, his gaze meeting hers. "I've spent so long shutting myself off from the world, from people, from my own feelings. I've hurt people along the way, including you." Emma opened her mouth to protest, but he raised his hand to stop her. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, not yet. But I need you to know that I see the sacrifices you've made, the care you've given to Lily, and how much that's meant to me." Emma felt a lump form in her throat. She wasn't sure what to say. She had never expected James to admit his mistakes so openly. It was almost too much to take in, too soon. "You don't have to say anything," James continued. "I just need you to know that I'm trying to be better. For Lily. For you." His words were simple, but there was a sincerity in his tone that struck Emma deeply. For the first time, she believed that he was truly trying to change, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. As the days turned into weeks, Emma began to notice more changes in James. He was still distant at times, still carrying the weight of his past, but he was present in a way that he had never been before. He was listening, really listening, when she spoke, and his actions spoke louder than words ever could. One evening, as the sun began to set, James invited Emma and Lily to join him for dinner at a restaurant. It wasn't anything fancy, just a casual meal, but the gesture meant more than any expensive dinner could. As they sat together, laughing over shared stories and passing the food around the table, Emma realized that for the first time in a long while, she felt a sense of peace. She wasn't just a nanny anymore. She was part of this family. James's presence no longer felt like an impenetrable wall, but something warm, something that could hold them all together. The evening ended with a quiet walk home, Lily skipping along beside them, and Emma couldn't help but smile. She had spent so long feeling like an outsider, but now, as she walked beside James, she felt like she belonged. It was a feeling she hadn't known in years. And just when she thought the night couldn't get any better, James turned to her with a soft smile. "Emma," he said, his voice almost shy. "I know it's still early, but I wanted to ask if you'd stay for a while longer, if you'd be part of this. Our family, for as long as you want." Emma's heart skipped a beat. She had been waiting for this moment, for him to truly see her, to acknowledge her as more than just a caretaker. And now, it was happening. She took a deep breath, looking into his eyes. "I'd like that," she said softly, her voice full of emotion. "I'd like that very much." And just like that, Emma felt a shift inside her. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, truly living, in a way that she had never thought possible. There was hope now, a future she hadn't dared to imagine, and for the first time, she felt like she was home. As the weeks passed, Emma found herself slowly letting down her guard, allowing the connection she had with James to grow deeper. It was a gradual process, but with each passing day, she felt more and more like she was part of something real, something that was beginning to feel like a family. James, too, seemed to be opening up in ways she hadn't imagined possible. There were still moments when he would retreat into his thoughts, lost in the weight of his past, but they were becoming fewer. More often than not, he would smile at her across the room, a smile that was no longer reserved for business meetings or formal occasions, but one that spoke of trust, of companionship, of something more. One Saturday afternoon, as the sun filtered through the windows and cast a warm glow over the living room, James called Emma into the study. He had been going through some paperwork, but when she entered, he stood up, looking unusually serious. "Emma," he began, his voice steady but carrying a weight she hadn't expected, "I need to talk to you about something." She felt a wave of nervousness wash over her. Had she done something wrong? Was he about to tell her that their newfound understanding was only temporary? "What is it?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. James ran a hand through his hair and sat down at the desk. "I've been thinking a lot about my life," he said, his gaze focused on the papers in front of him, though Emma could see the tension in his shoulders. "About the way I've been living. About what really matters." Emma's heart began to race. This wasn't like their usual conversations. There was something more in his tone, something deeper. "I've realized that for so long, I've been chasing things that don't truly matter. Wealth, status, all the things I thought would make me happy. But in the process, I've lost sight of what's really important." He looked up at her then, his eyes intense, searching. "What's important is family, Emma. What's important is the people who truly care about you. And I've been blind to that for far too long." The words hung in the air, and Emma felt the weight of them settle into her chest. She didn't know what to say. This was more than she had expected. This was more than just a change in his behavior. This was an admission, a realization that everything he had been doing, everything he had built, had been for the wrong reasons. He was finally seeing the truth. "I've spent so much of my life in isolation, thinking that if I kept everything under control, if I kept my emotions buried, everything would work out," James continued, his voice quieter now, almost as if he was speaking to himself. "But that's not how it works, is it?" Emma shook her head slightly, her heart aching as she watched him open up. This was the man she had always known was buried deep inside, the man she had hoped would emerge. "No," she said softly. "It doesn't work that way." James took a deep breath, and for the first time in what felt like forever, his shoulders relaxed. He stood up from the desk and walked over to her. "I've realized that I can't do this alone," he said. "I don't want to do this alone." Emma looked at him, unsure of what he was asking. But before she could speak, he reached out, gently taking her hand in his. "I want you to be a part of my life. Emma, I want you to be a part of Lily's life. I want us to be a family, together." The words were simple, but they hit her like a tidal wave. She had never imagined that James would say something like that. Not after everything he had been through, not after how distant he had been for so long. But here he was, asking her to be part of something bigger than just the role she had played in his life as a nanny. He was asking her to be family. Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. This was everything she had wanted, everything she had secretly hoped for. But it was also terrifying. She had never allowed herself to believe in a future like this, not after all the years of struggle and sacrifice. She had kept herself at arm's length, afraid to get hurt, afraid of being let down. But now, standing before James, feeling the warmth of his hand in hers, she realized that this was no longer just a dream. This was real. I don't know what to say, she whispered, her voice trembling. I never expected this. I never thought you'd see me like this. James smiled gently, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. I didn't see you before, Emma, he said softly. But I see you now. I see everything you've done for Lily, for me. And I'm not going to let that go. There was a silence between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence filled with understanding, with the weight of everything that had been said, everything that had been shared. Emma knew this was the beginning of something new. A new chapter, a new life. And for the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The days that followed that conversation felt like a new beginning for Emma and James, one that neither of them had fully expected, but both were starting to believe in. It was as if the walls that had separated them for so long were finally starting to crumble, piece by piece. James had kept his word, showing up for Lily and Emma in ways he never had before. The small gestures, the quiet moments, they were beginning to add up. There were still days when James retreated into his thoughts, days when the weight of his past would pull him back, but it didn't feel as isolating anymore. Emma was there now, and with her, he felt a sense of hope he hadn't experienced in years. One afternoon, as they sat in the living room together, Lily playing with her dolls on the floor, Emma noticed something different in James's eyes. He was watching them both, a soft smile on his face, but there was something deeper there, a kind of peace that hadn't been there before. She couldn't help but notice how much he had changed in such a short time. James had always been focused, always distant, but now he was learning to live again, to feel again. It wasn't perfect, not by any means, but it was real, and it was enough. I've been thinking a lot, James said, breaking the silence. Emma looked up from the book she was reading, a little surprised by the seriousness in his tone. About what? She asked, her voice gentle. He hesitated for a moment, as though searching for the right words. About everything, he said slowly. About how much I've missed, how much I've neglected. I've spent so much of my life running from things I didn't want to face. I thought if I kept everything under control, if I built this empire, that it would fill the emptiness inside me. But it didn't. He paused, looking at Emma. I didn't know what I was missing until you came into my life. Emma felt her heart skip a beat. She hadn't expected this, hadn't expected him to say something like that. She had always known he cared, but this was different. It was deeper, more vulnerable. It was the kind of truth that could only come from someone who had truly opened up. James, she said softly, I don't know what to say. I never thought you'd feel this way. He gave her a small, reassuring smile. You don't have to say anything, he replied. I just want you to know that I'm committed to being here for you, for Lily, for us. Emma's throat tightened, and she looked down at the floor, trying to compose herself. She hadn't allowed herself to dream of a life like this, one where she wasn't just scraping by, one where she was part of something, part of a family. But now, sitting next to James, with Lily happily playing at their feet, she realized that this was the life she had always wanted, the life she had always dreamed of but never believed she could have. I believe you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I believe in us. As the weeks went by, their connection deepened even further. James took Emma out on small dates, not the lavish kind that were meant to impress, but simple, meaningful moments that allowed them to talk, to laugh, to be together. They went for walks in the park, had dinner in quiet restaurants, and shared stories of their pasts. Emma found herself laughing again, something she hadn't done in so long. She was starting to realize that life didn't have to be about surviving anymore. She wasn't just getting by, she was living. It wasn't all smooth sailing, of course. There were moments of doubt, moments when they both wondered if they were truly ready to build a life together. James, with his past full of loss and pain, sometimes struggled to believe he deserved happiness. Emma, too, had her fears, her hesitations. But despite those moments, they were both committed to making it work. They both understood that healing wasn't a destination, it was a journey. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, James turned to Emma, his face soft with emotion. I don't know what the future holds, he said, but I know that I want to spend it with you. And Lily, I want to build something real with you. Emma smiled, her heart full, and reached out to take his hand. I want that too, she said, her voice steady now, full of confidence. I want to be part of your future. They sat there together in silence, the quiet hum of the evening surrounding them. knowing that no matter what came next, they had each other. And that, Emma realized, was all they truly needed. As the months went by, Emma and James's relationship continued to grow stronger, but so did the challenges that came with it. James, despite his progress, still had moments when his past weighed heavily on him, and there were times when he withdrew into himself. Emma, too, faced her own struggles, still carrying the burden of her past and her own fears of being vulnerable. However, there was a difference now. They both knew that they could rely on each other, and that, no matter how difficult things became, they would face them together. One evening, James sat in his office, staring at the papers in front of him, but his mind wasn't on the numbers. He was thinking about Emma, about how much she had brought into his life, about the love he had for her. He had never thought he would find peace again after losing his wife, but Emma had changed that. She had shown him that love wasn't just something you gave. It was something that healed, that brought light into the darkest places. As much as he had tried to keep his emotions buried for so long, he realized now that they were not a weakness but his greatest strength. He had fallen in love with Emma in a way he never thought possible, and the more he thought about their future, the more he knew he couldn't imagine it without her by his side. He needed to tell her this, to show her how much she meant to him. James stood up from his desk, his mind made up. He walked out of the office and down the hallway toward the living room, where Emma and Lily were sitting on the couch, enjoying a quiet evening together. As he entered the room, Emma looked up, her face lighting up with a smile. He couldn't help but smile back. She was everything he had never known he needed, and now, standing here in front of her, he realized that he wanted more than just a life with her. He wanted to build a future, a family, one where love was at the center of everything. He walked over to her, took her hand, and knelt down in front of her. "Emma," he began, his voice soft but filled with emotion. "I know I haven't always been the man you needed, but I'm trying. I've made mistakes, and I've hurt you, but I'm asking for another chance. A chance to show you how much I love you, how much I need you in my life. You and Lily, you're everything to me." Emma's eyes widened in surprise, and for a moment, she couldn't find the words to respond. She had always known that James cared, but this was more than she had ever imagined. This was vulnerability, raw and real, and it touched her deeply. James continued, his voice trembling slightly. "I want to spend the rest of my life making it up to you, showing you every day that you matter to me. I want us to be a family, to have the life we both deserve. Will you marry me, Emma?" The words hung in the air, and for a moment, Emma was silent, her heart racing. She had never expected this, not in a million years. She had never thought that someone like James, someone who had been so closed off for so long, could open up like this, could let her into his heart so completely. But here he was, asking her to be his partner for life, to be the family he had been missing. Emma looked into his eyes, her own filled with tears. She had always dreamed of a love like this, but she had never dared to believe it could be hers. But now, with James kneeling in front of her, with Lily by their side, she knew that this was real. She knew that this was where she was meant to be. "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Yes, I will marry you." A wave of relief and joy washed over James, and he stood up, pulling her into a tight embrace. As they held each other, Lily ran up to them, excitedly asking what was going on. James smiled, looking at Emma, and then back at Lily. "We're going to be a family," he said softly, "and we're going to make it the best family we can." Emma smiled through her tears, feeling the weight of everything they had been through, and realizing that all of it had led them to this moment, to this new beginning. A life filled with love, healing, and a promise for the future. It was everything she had ever wanted, and so much more. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a whirlwind of emotions and excitement for Emma and James. It felt surreal to both of them that they were finally planning the life they had always wanted, a life that was filled with love, understanding, and a sense of belonging. The house that once felt cold and empty was now filled with warmth, laughter, and the promise of something beautiful. Lily was overjoyed about the wedding, and she constantly talked about the new family she was going to have. Emma couldn't help but smile every time she heard Lily's excitement. She had never imagined her life could be like this, that she would be part of a family that cherished her. But now, here she was, preparing to marry the man who had shown her that love and healing could happen even after the darkest times. James, too, seemed to be a different man. The walls he had built around himself were finally coming down, and he was no longer the cold, distant man who had been consumed by grief. He was fully present, not only for Emma and Lily but for himself as well. He was beginning to believe that he deserved happiness, that he could have a life filled with love and joy. It was a slow, steady transformation, but it was undeniable. As the wedding day approached, the couple spent their evenings together, talking about their dreams, their hopes for the future, and the life they would build together. It wasn't about the grand gestures or the perfect ceremony. It was about the commitment they were making to each other, the promise to support and love one another no matter what. On the day of the wedding, Emma stood in front of the mirror, staring at her reflection, unable to believe how far she had come. She had once been a single mother, struggling to make ends meet, and now she was about to marry the man she loved, the man who loved her back, and they were going to build a family together. Her heart swelled with emotion as she thought about all they had been through to get to this point. She had been afraid to let herself dream of a future like this, but now, standing in this moment, she realized that all of the pain, the heartache, and the uncertainty had led her to this moment of joy. James walked into the room, looking handsome in his suit, and when he saw Emma, his eyes softened. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice full of warmth and admiration. Emma smiled, feeling a rush of love for him. This was the man she had fallen in love with, the man who had shown her what true love was, the man who had given her the confidence to believe in herself. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I can't believe we're here." James reached for her hand, gently squeezing it. "I can't either," he said, his voice steady, yet full of wonder. "But I know one thing for sure. We're exactly where we're meant to be." The ceremony was intimate, just the three of them and a few close friends, but it felt perfect. As they exchanged vows, Emma's heart raced, and she knew that this was the moment that would change their lives forever. She promised to love and support James, to stand by his side through all of life's challenges, and he promised to do the same. When the ceremony ended, and they were officially married, James kissed Emma gently, a kiss that held all the promises of the future. As they walked out of the small chapel, hand in hand, Lily ran up to them, excitedly calling out, "We're a family now." Emma and James laughed, their hearts swelling with love for the little girl who had brought them together. As they drove back to their home that evening, Emma looked out the window, a smile on her face. She couldn't have imagined a better life, a better future. Everything she had ever dreamed of was right in front of her. James squeezed her hand, and she looked at him, her heart full. "I love you," she whispered, and he smiled back, his eyes full of love. "I love you too, Emma. And this is just the beginning." And with that, Emma knew that no matter what the future held, they would face it together, as a family, filled with love, hope, and endless possibilities. As Emma and James settled into their new life together, they both found themselves constantly amazed by how far they had come. The days felt fuller now, their love for each other growing stronger with each passing moment. There was a comfort in knowing that they had faced so many challenges and come out stronger on the other side, together. For the first time in years, James found himself waking up every morning with a sense of peace, a sense of belonging that he had never thought possible. He no longer felt the weight of his grief suffocating him, because Emma and Lily had given him a new purpose, a new reason to smile every day. Emma, too, found herself finally believing in the future. Her life had been filled with so many struggles, so many moments of doubt, but now she had the family she had always dreamed of. There was laughter in the house now, joy in their hearts, and love that bound them all together. Lily, who had once been the center of their lives, was now growing up in a home filled with stability and warmth, and Emma couldn't help but marvel at how much their lives had changed. One Saturday morning, James and Emma sat on the porch, enjoying a cup of coffee together, watching the sunrise. It was a peaceful moment, one that felt almost like a dream. "I still can't believe we're here," Emma said softly, looking at James. "I never thought I could have a life like this, one where I'm not just surviving, but actually living." James reached over and took her hand, his eyes filled with affection. "I never thought I could find this kind of peace," he said quietly. "You and Lily." You've made me realize that love is what makes everything worth it. I didn't know what I was missing until I had both of you in my life." Emma smiled, her heart full. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "I've never been this happy. I didn't think it was possible, but now I know that dreams can come true." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, their hands intertwined, the morning sun casting a soft glow on the world around them. It was a moment of pure contentment, a moment that they both knew they would treasure forever. As time went on, they continued to build their life together, taking each day as it came. There were still challenges, still moments of doubt, but they faced everything with the knowledge that they had each other. No matter what came their way, they knew they could handle it, because they were a team. The family they had created was stronger than any obstacle that might come their way. And so, as the years passed, Emma and James's love only grew. They watched Lily grow into a kind, intelligent young woman, and their hearts swelled with pride at the person she was becoming. They had created a life built on love, trust, and unwavering support, and it was more than either of them had ever imagined. On their 10th wedding anniversary, James surprised Emma with a quiet dinner at the place where they had first met, a small restaurant in the heart of the city. As they sat together, holding hands, James looked into her eyes, his expression full of love. "I've never thanked you enough for everything you've given me, Emma," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You've made me a better man, a better father, and I'll be forever grateful." Emma's eyes filled with tears as she smiled at him, her heart full of love. "I've never been this happy, James," she whispered. "I've never felt more loved, more at peace. Thank you for showing me that life can be beautiful again." James kissed her gently, a kiss that spoke volumes about everything they had been through and everything they had yet to experience. And as they sat there, surrounded by the quiet hum of the city and the warmth of each other's presence, they knew that no matter where life took them, they would always have each other. They had found their way back to love, back to hope, and they would hold on to it forever. Their story was far from over. It was just beginning.